Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by Curiosity Stream. So I've been hesitating in making this video for kind of a long time now because I knew that it would make a lot of commenters really upset. But over the past week, I've rewatched more than my fair share of Rick and Morty. And honestly, I just can't get around the fact that for me, Season 4 is starting to feel like the beginning of the end. Not in the literal sense, obviously. The show was picked up for 70 episodes a couple years ago, and it will be with us for a very long time. But in the sense of it being the Rick and Morty that I love. A must-watch comedy that constantly feels like it's trying surprising, weird, new things, while having some surprisingly meaningful character development. Season 4 is far from a train wreck, but it does feel like it's starting to lose its grip on what made the show special. And in this video, I'm going to try to get to the bottom of why I feel that way. I've liked Dan Harmon's work for a long time now. Honestly, I was watching Community Season 1 live as it aired all the way back in 2009. And even though TV is a very collaborative medium with a lot of different writers, directors, and producers in the mix, Harmon's ethereal voice always comes through loud and clear. He's very obsessed with genre, tropes, and cliches, deconstructing them, commenting on them, and sometimes even kind of honoring them. As Abed loved pointing out, it's very meta. But when an episode of one of his shows is really great, it goes above and beyond that. It often uses those same tools, but instead of just riffing on its subject matter, it uses them to say something about its characters, explore an aspect of them we didn't know much about before, and often really addresses their deepest fears and insecurities. In their best moments, Community and Rick and Morty do this perfectly. Balancing these really conceptual, crazy storylines and the characters' inner lives is what Harmon excels at. And when you combine that with Justin Roiland's style and delivery, it made Rick and Morty feel really unique. And a lot of that is still very much intact in Season 4. But the one place I feel like it's really been falling flat lately is with its characters. Because I'm just not sure that the show has anything new or all that interesting to say about them. Take Claw and Hoarder, Special Rick'em's Morty. In my opinion, the single worst episode in the show's history. In it, Morty is desperate for a dragon. Rick is reluctant and eventually caves, but in the end, owning a dragon kind of sucks, and Morty is totally disillusioned. And I'm sorry, but I feel like we've seen the same basic setup so many times already. Morty has an idea that he thinks would be cool, Rick says it's a bad idea, Morty does it anyway, and it turns out, wouldn't you know it, Rick was right. We've seen this formula play out already in much better episodes. Like in Rick Potion number 9, where Rick reluctantly makes a love potion for Morty that goes horribly wrong. They end up abandoning the entire dimension, and it's one of the show's best half hours. Or in Raising Gazorpazorp, where Morty begs Rick to let him buy a sex bot at a space pawn shop and ends up having to raise an alien son. Which is also a really good episode. Claw and Hoarder doesn't come close to measuring up to those. But not only that, it feels like kind of a step backwards for Morty. The show has done a pretty solid job at developing Morty to be a little more jaded. He's seen and gone through a lot at this point, and is pretty far from the wild-eyed kid that we saw in Season 1. I mean, just 2 episodes earlier, he was treating an alien invasion caused by the app that Jerry helped make as any other Thursday. But when the show needed him to kind of revert to Season 1 Morty just to set up this dragon story, they did it. And I'd probably be a lot more okay with that if the payoff had been worth it, but it really just wasn't. The concept that soul bonding with a dragon is a lot like sex was mildly funny the first time they made the joke, then the rest of the episode just drove it into the ground over and over again. Comedy is hugely subjective, sure, but even if you did think that was really funny, it's still hard to not be disappointed by what they did with Rick in this episode. There's a moment where they go to the dragon's world that's actually really interesting. Rick is shown right away that his science just will not work here. And suddenly his entire bag of tricks is taken away from him, while Morty is getting really into this whole magic thing. I loved this setup because it put Rick in a position that he's not totally used to. Taking Rick's power away completely and making him have to rise to the occasion without it in a dimension where only magic works is a great idea for a Rick and Morty episode. The problem is they do basically nothing with it, and pretty soon Rick and Summer are super powerful and breezing through everything, and the potential that could have been there is just totally lost. I don't think this episode told us anything we didn't already know about Rick, Morty, or Summer. And it didn't pull off anything I don't think the show has already done much better. To be fair though, it's not like I dislike all these episodes. The season premiere, Edge of Tomorty, is a very, very solid one. The Rick plot, where he keeps dying and going into these different clones of himself, I think is funny and leads to some really solid jokes. The Morty storyline is pretty good too, as we watch him follow a crystal to whatever outcome leads to him dying with Jessica by his side. I think a lot of it worked really well, especially that great courthouse scene. But again, even in this episode that I liked more, some of it feels pretty tired. Morty has changed a lot since season 1, but something like his relationship with Jessica just hasn't. They have the exact same dynamic that they've always had, as Jessica has remained more of the generic teen girl and less of an actual character. I'm not saying the show needs to devote a bunch of time to developing Jessica into like a 3-dimensional personality, but if they're gonna keep going back to this well, I do think they're gonna need a new take on it. After 4 seasons and so many different life-changing experiences, I think it's time the show starts treating this part of Morty's life differently too. Because right now, this just feels stagnant. I guess stagnant is the way that I would describe most of season 4. For the first time, I don't feel like the characters on the show are really being deconstructed in any meaningful way. Instead, they're just on a treadmill, never moving forward or changing. I will say the Old Man in the Seat, where we learn about Rick's perfect toilet planet, at least tried to do this. I think the episode was kind of light on laughs, at least compared to most episodes, but the last 5 minutes of that story were really great. We saw how he completely isolates himself from anyone he could get close with, basically leaving them in some idealized form of the Matrix, and how he kind of hates himself for it. That was interesting. Most of the time though, this season is perfectly satisfied with just repeating character beats we've seen a million times before. Jerry is upset that Beth thinks he can't hang Christmas lights without hurting himself, so pretty soon he's refusing Rick's help even when he's looking at almost certain death. Taken by itself, this wasn't a terrible little B story or anything. I actually really love the scene where the guys in the biker bar get super angry at Jerry over just holding a rock for no reason. But as a whole, it did feel pretty tired. We've seen this from Jerry so many times at this point. And it's not that he needs a whole new personality. Jerry will always be Jerry. But maybe it's time to put him into situations and storylines that don't just drive home the exact same points about him over and over again. In a way, Rick and Morty Season 4 kind of reminds me of another animated show I love, The Simpsons Seasons 11 and 12. The years where the show was still very solid and very watchable, but seemed to settle for repetition and stagnation. In the golden years of the show, there were episodes that really dug into the Simpsons as human beings, like Season 6 Grandpa vs. Sexual Inadequacy, which expected us to really care about Homer and his dad's relationship, as well as giving us a new lens to really understand Homer through with some funny and sad childhood flashbacks. By season 12 though, the show was just trying to hit the expected beats of a Simpsons episode, rarely trying to say anything new about these characters. And you know, it was honestly pretty good at that, because the writers on The Simpsons were still really talented. But it definitely felt like the beginning of the end. The point where The Simpsons started transitioning into the shadow of itself that it is today. This may sound harsh, but that's what this season of Rick and Morty has felt like to me. The show losing the perfectionism and drive that made those early years so interesting, and settling into a 70-episode run of repeating the same basic character beats. In the season premiere, Rick is disgusted by fascist Morty, who just wants to have adventures like the ones they've already had before. And I think Rick is right, they do need to keep introducing new characters and locations, not just recycling the ones that they've already used. But the show also needs to take it a step farther. Showing us dragons may be fun and new, but it doesn't mean all that much if it doesn't put these characters into situations that feel fresh, that stretches them in some way, and gives us a different perspective on them. For years, Rick and Morty has been great at peeling back the layers of its lead characters. I just don't think Season 4 has done that so far. but here's hoping the back half of this season does. Right now though, it's looking like it'll be a while before the show is back on our screens, and we're probably all looking for stuff to watch at the moment. My recommendation is Space Dive, a documentary about how they did that insane record-breaking freefall jump from space. I enjoyed this one a lot because I had no idea just how much went into preparing for something like that, which made seeing them execute it even more satisfying. You can watch that free right now on CuriosityStream, and by signing up for CuriosityStream's annual membership, you'll also be getting Nebula, a great streaming service made by independent creators like Lindsay Ellis, Patrick H. Willems, Just Right, and me. It's a way for YouTubers to go beyond the demands of YouTube's algorithm and create something new. I do have an exclusive video all about Cheers on there, so you can support a lot of indie creators and get tons of high quality documentaries just by signing up for their annual membership, which is only $19.99 for the entire year. So get access to all of that and a free trial by going to curiositystream.com/captainmidnight, which you'll find in the description and pinned comment below.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.